Welcome to the Be Still, Be Aware series, where nothing is off limits. I'm your host, Claire Foord. Let's talk.
Before we begin, we'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which this series is recorded and pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging.
Hi, welcome back. In part one of this two-part episode, Claire spoke of her perfect pregnancy and receiving the news that her daughter Alfie was born still. In this section, she speaks in more depth about her delivery of Alfie and how she navigated life after stillbirth. Here's Claire.
I look back now and I think that wasn't great to say that. I know you were just trying to help to say, you know what, you can go on to have more children, but I'm about to have a baby and this is my child. So my sisters came in, and for anybody who knows what some of those drugs do, I was told have an epidural, do all these things. And so I was like, whatever, like I said, just do what you need to do to me to whatever, numb this. And so I was severely itchy. I wanted to I was literally itching myself so much that I was starting to bleed. And so my sisters
That's a common effect of an epidural.
Yeah, and when I'd had so many drugs, this was my body trying to get rid of them. And so needless to say, for future pregnancies, I didn't go down that path in that way. But they were rubbing my legs and massaging my legs, and because I just wanted to be able to get up as quickly as I possibly could once I'd delivered her. And they were just in disbelief. One of my sisters had just had her son, only days, a couple of weeks prior to our daughter Alfie being born, and she felt, she was like, oh, can I come in? Do you want him to come in? Do you want me to stay away? And she had this level of guilt, I think. And I was like, well, no, of course, I actually really wanted to see him. I think I'm telling you that because I think it's really important for families to understand that just because your baby has died doesn't mean that you don't want to ever see your nephews, nieces or other babies. I still love my nephews and nieces just as much as I would have. And in fact, Alfie and Orlando would have grown up together. It's nice to be able to watch him growing up and imagine where she'd be at. And I think I needed him through that journey to be able to support her, but also there was times where I couldn't go anywhere near him and I needed the space. And so having that freedom of, the freedom to do that and the understanding from my sister that would be okay was really important, and that communicating with one another. So I was really supportive. I was really supported in my delivery, and it was a long delivery, but Alfie was born perfectly into this world, and straight away my parents, my in-laws and my sisters, all four of them were surrounded around us and with us the moment she was here in this world. And I delivered her, and I brought her up to my chest, and I was in such shock that I could not stop shaking. I was shaking uncontrollably. And I remember holding her, and I was holding her and she was so tiny. Sorry, when I say tiny, tiny like a newborn. She was actually really long and stunning and beautiful.
How many pounds was she?
6 pounds and 13 ounces. Now I have quite small babies; they're all about that size. So that was, she 6 pounds 13 ounces, and she was 53 centimeters long.
Oh,
so she was long and tall,
yeah.
and she just had this, this beautiful button nose and these big, chubby cheeks and these beautiful rosebud lips. And a stillborn baby has bright red lips. That's a common thing that, if you are to birth a baby stillborn, that's one of the things that will be the common thing, is that it looks like they're wearing red lipstick, these bright, beautiful, bright red lips. And she had the most voluptuous lips, and she was absolutely stunning. But I held her, and she had no muscle because she had died. And prior to this, the midwife had said to me, you're so unlucky. This is so rare. And I thought, okay, well, what have I done? I must have done something to... and I remembered I ate this burger and so I thought that I had killed her because I had mayonnaise on my burger, although I stopped eating it. And then I know that for those who are listening and watching this, just understand that that's not possible, because listeria takes more time than that to take effect. But I had thought, well, that's all I know. That's it. I didn't drink. I didn't smoke. I exercised in moderation. I slept on my side. I ate well. I didn't, work right up to the end. I made sure I rested. I literally did everything I was told, that all the books told me to do, that all of my care providers told me to do. But some of the things that I was doing and getting to know her, I didn't realise were things that were indicators that she was not, she was vulnerable. Vulnerable to what? To dying. And they were too afraid to talk about it in pregnancy. So, but when I held her, she had no muscle. And I was shaking so much that her head was flopping back and forward, and I just thought, I'm going to break her. And so I passed her to Brad, and I said, I can't, you need to hold her. And so he held her, and he had these moments of peace and love around her. And I wish that I had asked everybody to hold her, because after that, I really only got to hold her one more time. I saw her multiple times, but I wasn't allowed to hold her. When I say that, she was wheeled in, wrapped up tightly in this really tight muslin wrap, all covered, and put us to the bedside. And I would touch her, and I wanted desperately to hold her. And I asked the midwife if I could bathe her and give her a bath. And she said no. Now, I don't know why she said that. I don't know whether it was because they were worried that, because when a baby is stillborn as well, you can babies deteriorate really quickly, and so their skin starts to become loose, and they get what's called skin slip, and it starts to slip off, and so that can reveal very, very red raw skin. Imagine falling over, skinning your knee, and it being quite red raw. So often you can have marks over the body that's like that. And so maybe, that's my understanding, maybe that she didn't want that to occur, that her skin would slip more. But really all I was asking was to unwrap her. Like, she was so tightly wrapped there, and I felt like I had to ask to touch her, and I to ask to hold her, and she was treated, we were very cared for, and I don't want to make that sound any different, and hindsight's a wonderful thing. But the things that I had wished that I had known then and what was offered then were really important. But once she was born, I was handed this bag, a paper bag full of paperwork that literally had pamphlets galore in there, and there was a teddy bear. Now, and they said, here's a teddy bear, because this is a charity that likes to give teddy bears, because you're going to go home empty-handed. And here's a bag full of reading material that you can go through and hand to your families, and And that's literally the way I was given it. Like, there was no sensitivity around it. It was just like, here's a bunch of stuff. I was like, I don't want a bunch of stuff, nor do I want, in all due respect, nor do I want a teddy to replace my child. Now, I understand what that was meant for, but the way it was delivered to me was not with sensitivity, so I didn't really understand. You can't replace her, but that was something for me to hold. That was it's actually a gift for my baby.
Yeah.
You know? Anyway, so we had these things, and thankfully my parents opened the bag and they went through it, because they were just trying to figure out what to do. And so they went out, and everyone had left the room, and Alfie had come back in, and one of the biggest gifts that the hospital gave us, they rang Heartfelt Photography, and Heartfelt came in and took photos of Alfie, but without us knowing.
Oh, okay.
At that stage, I had been asked, do you want photos taken? Like, this was just like these random statements, and amongst all of this, whilst I'm birthing.
Oh, this is during your birth?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
There is no time. This is the
Yeah,
thing. There's no
okay.
time given to you either. It's all at once. You're just, for those who've delivered a baby, it's very chaotic. It's very busy anyway. But now you're coupled with all this other stuff that you've got to do on top. And do you want a photographer to come in and take photos? Some people find that nice, and I thought, I don't know. But that was a wonderful gift that they organised. And then when I got to hold Alfie for the last time, the single only time and the last time, and I was holding her, and Brad and I were having this really special moment of you know, it was really peaceful. It was just us and her, and we were just in this room, and the heartfelt photographer was outside, and she sort of walked in and said, "Oh, do you mind if I take some photos?" And we were just like, "Yeah, sure." And those photos are so treasured, and I'm so thankful that I've got those, because you don't have more memories. I didn't realise at that point that I was going to have to give her back. It doesn't really occur to you that, okay, your baby's died, you know, okay, this is stillbirth from the pamphlet that says what's happening. So that was the first time I read the word stillbirth. And I just thought, hang on, why didn't anyone tell me this was possible? You know, when I read this, one of the only pamphlet I read in the hospital, and it said the word stillbirth, and it was another person's story, and there was some statistics around it as well, and I just went, what? She told me it was rare. You know, this isn't rare. It said that there was 6 babies every day that are stillborn, and I realised that I was, you know, my husband and I were one of these families affected by losing our child, but there was another 5 families that day that would experience that in Australia. I was like, hang on, what? How is that rare? So that was the first time that Still Aware sort of sparked that the idea that I wanted to, not that I knew it was Still Aware at that point, but that I needed to say something. I needed to understand why I'd missed it. Why is it that 5 of these health professionals that were caring for me in my pregnancy didn't mention it? Did they not know? You know, why wasn't anyone here to tell me? I'm sure no one would hold that information back if they truly knew this. But in hindsight, you know, they actually all did. They all knew about stillbirth, but not one of them chose to tell me. And unfortunately, that's the case for a lot of pregnancies. And after we left the hospital, you know, and we had to give Alfie back and drive away, that was, you know, one of the hardest days, you know, to be able to have to leave her there. I just felt so unnatural and so wrong.
How did that happen? Like, I can't even imagine how hard that is. Like, does someone wheel her away from you? Like, what?
So after I had seen her, when Heartfelt came to took those photos, I didn't see her again after that. I was asked if I would like to see her one last time, and I realised that every time she came into the room, she changed and she was deteriorating because I wasn't offered a cold cot.
You weren't?
No. So despite the fact that the hospital has a cold cot, I wasn't offered it.
Was there a reason for that?
No, I didn't know that they existed at the time. I didn't even know what to ask for. So that's the responsibility really of the carers, you know. Had I been offered that, I would have been able to have her there by my side, and I wish I had that opportunity to be able to dress her and to care for her and to wrap her and bathe her and do the things that, you know, mothers want to do. I wasn't offered that. It was literally wheel her in, wheel her out, wheel her in, wheel her out. She's starting to warm out, we've got to put her back in the fridge. It was very like, okay, so you had enough time sort of thing. You know, it's time to put her back in the fridge. I mean, that sounds awful, right? It's so unnatural.
Did you feel like you had very little control over your
Totally.
situation?
I didn't feel like I had a say in when she came in or when she went out. I felt like, and I didn't know any different. This was my first child, and I didn't know that she was actually treated like a dead child. I know I'm using very, you know, forthright language, but I think it's real and it needs to be real. But in fact, she was exactly the same as my other children that I would subsequently have, and, you know, have here with me on this earth. But she was treated very differently, and I felt like I had to ask permission to do things. Whereas when her siblings were born, it was very, very quickly an about face. You know, okay, can I have your baby now, or can I hold her? Do you mind if I just quickly grab your son so I can weigh him? It was all about asking the mother for permission, asking the parents for permission, or allowing us to be part of it. Would you like to cut the cord? Would you like to come and watch me do this? Would you like to come and watch the baby being weighed? None of that occurred when, you know, our child was stillborn. It was very, well, I'll just quickly do all these things, wrap her up and put her next to you and then wheel her in and out. So, but every time I got to see her, I was really worried I would never want her to wheel away again. I realised that the more and more I was that connection between you and your child is so incredibly strong, and it's so unnatural to see your baby wheeled out of the room. And I just knew it was getting harder and harder and harder and harder for them to wheel her out and back again and wheel her out. And it was just so unnatural. In hindsight, I wish I'd taken her home, you know. And for some people who are listening and watching this, I think that's really odd.
Is that something that can happen? I
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, in fact, the really ironic thing is, you know, in the hospital you're told, okay, where do you want to have a funeral? Do you want to have an autopsy? You know, who's your funeral director? I'm like, oh my God, we never thought about these things. Who's our funeral director? Are you serious? So, you know, we had to figure all that out in the hospital as well. And that's what made it easier for me to walk away, is that we had found somebody who, you know, we had chosen, that somebody had suggested we use, that wasn't somebody from the hospital. But, you know, that's a whole other story that could take ages to talk about. But there were little signs that I believe us, you know, I believe in signs. I believe in, you know, that there is more. And I think if I didn't have that, I often thought, and I even said to my husband in the hospital, gee, I'm glad I believe in signs, because gee, how much harder would this be if I didn't? But on your question, when I went home and we were about to have her funeral, one of my other sisters said, oh, some mums have gathered enough money together to be able to get you a cold cot so you can bring your daughter home. And I was like, oh my God, she's been in the fridge for a week. And I was like, really consider. It was a very, very hard decision for me to make. I'd been out of the hospital for a week. I hadn't seen Alfie for a week. And of course, all I wanted to do was to see her. Yeah. And I had to say no, because I knew there was no way I would give her back if I got her back in my arms again. Yeah. I had nightmares, that totally unnatural ones, that of, I suppose, caring nightmares, where I imagined I was walking around with an esky with my child in it, you know, and that I would have to get home and put her in the fridge and put her back in the esky and walk around like, you know, and all the other mums were walking around with the pram. You know, what a weird dream or nightmare to have, that you're, you know, you're running around frantically making sure that you've got enough bags of ice to keep your child cool. It's very unnatural. And clearly these are all very weird things, that these are, you know, obviously what occurs when you're going through things like this or experiencing a journey like that. But if I go back to the fact that my sister and I were pregnant at the same time, and we both had our baby showers, and her baby shower, she got lots of different types of presents and things like that. And then my baby shower followed, I think, almost the day after or the week after. It was very close together. And we were sitting down, you know, as you do after, you know, spending time with family and friends, and we were opening the gifts. And I remember opening all these presents and looking at my sisters and going, this is super weird, because I had every gift that I opened had some sort of caterpillar on it. And I know that sounds really strange. I said, did you guys think this was like caterpillar themed or something? This is super weird. So we had like Very Hungry Caterpillar books, caterpillar toys, caterpillar t-shirts, you know, caterpillar everywhere. And I was like, this is super weird. And I said, oh, well, that means something, but, you know, I'll figure that out later. And I didn't think anything of it. And then when I was in hospital, I looked at my husband. It was just he and I in the room on our own. And I went, oh my God, that's so cruel. I've just figured it out. You remember how I got all those caterpillar things at the, you know, baby shower? That's it. Alfie's the caterpillar. You know, she has been in her cocoon safely for 9 months, and now she's just going to fly away, and we don't get to have her in our arms anymore. I was like, she's a butterfly. It's, you know, cruel and beautiful, but wow, how awful. And at that moment, as I was saying that, the rain, like suddenly it was February, like the 12th of February when she was born, like the skies opened up and there was like thunder clouds and clapping lightning, and the rain pelted on the window. I was like, thank God that it's raining. You know, I needed that to the tears flowing, you know, and everything stops because your world stops, right? So after I delivered Alfie and she was born, thankfully I had such an amazing support group around me, and like, what a wonderful gift to have in this beautiful support network, and feeling engulfed by all this love and adoration for me and for Brad, but also for our daughter, and just being there and touching her and being part of this, whatever this was. But it was the birth of our child, and being part of that grief and also part of that love with us. They contacted everybody and sent out messages. Thank God. There was no way. I didn't know, how do you do a birth announcement?
Had you prepared that? A lot of
totally.
pregnant women have.
I still have it. I've often thought,
Yeah.
when am I going to do her birth announcement? And part of me wanted to do it, but then I was like, but I wanted there to be a photo of her on there, and I couldn't put the photo on there because no one wants to see a dead child. I didn't think that was natural. So at the first, I drew a picture of her. And that was the first thing that I did, because I wanted a photo of her at her funeral, and I didn't think it was appropriate. In fact, I didn't want to offend anybody that there was a photo of my dead daughter, although she looked like perfection. But we knew that she was dead. Little did we know that most of the photos that we have historically are actually of dead people, because no one could sit still long enough to take a photo. So realistically, when did that actually happen, that we became so uncomfortable with death? But I did that out of courtesy for friends and family, which, in hindsight, that's ridiculous, but at that time I just didn't know what to do. But after I had delivered Alfie, our first bunch of flowers came in, and we were surrounded by, I love flowers and I love gardens and I love nature. We got this first bunch of beautiful flowers, and in it was a stem with a butterfly on top.
Oh, wow.
And then the next thing came in, and it had a butterfly card. And then the next gift, and then a gift came in, it was wrapped in butterfly paper, and I was surrounded by butterflies everywhere. Random,
Wow.
right? And I just thought, wow, that's a beautiful sign that, there's something here, that there is more to this than the end. This isn't the end. This is the beginning of whatever this is for us. This pivotal moment in our life that, has broken us, but it'll be a rebirth, and we'll be okay, somehow through this.
Yeah.
That said, I didn't want to be here anymore. I didn't understand. I never understood suicide. I never understood wanting to take your own life. I always just thought that was really unusual, and I know that everybody has different levels of where they're at, and emotionally, and depression wise and things. But it was the first time I didn't want to exist. I thought, well, hang on, my daughter didn't get to exist. Why should I? Thankfully, those thoughts changed to, hang on a second, don't be so selfish. She didn't get a chance to exist, so you need to exist better. This needs to be better. So I literally, while I was in the hospital, my sister said, can I get you anything? I said, I need 2 art journals. And I knew exactly the type of art journal I wanted, because I use them all the time. And I knew the exact ones I wanted. I said, I just need 2 of them and a HB pencil. So she got them for me. And one of them was my hate journal, basically, where I could just write all the shit that was hurting, the pain. But the other one was only for positivity. And so I forced myself every night to write 2 things that I was thankful for from the moment I left that hospital.
Did anyone tell you to do that? Was
No.
that your own idea?
It was just something that I needed to do, because I needed to end the day on a positive note, because life was still good, despite the fact that our daughter had died. I knew that if I didn't find some positive in my day, that I might not be here today.
That's an incredibly amazing thing to do, especially from yourself, and I think a great tip for others that perhaps might be helpful for others going through similar things. Another thing that I remember is your family also helping you pick up the pieces in terms of the signs of what would have been, like the nursery, the car. There's so much that you have there. Tell me how that all happened.
When we were on our way home, and there's lots that went on between then. I think we could stay for weeks talking about just that one moment in time and the days that followed. But I remember just saying, look, when we leave, I don't want the car seat in the car. I thought that would just be so cruel to look back and see an empty car seat when that was where, Alfie was meant to be lying and coming home with us. So I asked them to remove the car seat out of the car. They also said, would you want us to pack up the nursery? And I was like, thank God they asked me, because I was like, no, I don't want you to pack up the nursery. And I'll tell you why I'm so thankful for that in a minute. But at that time, I did say to them, though, can you please remove her bassinet from our room? I don't want you to pack it up, but can you please place it into her nursery? Because I just don't think I could see that right now, empty and sleeping next to it with nothing in it. So I couldn't go home. And when I say couldn't, obviously physically I could have gone home. I was very fortunate to have had a choice and been offered a place to stay. I couldn't go home because I just couldn't face it. I just didn't want to be alone. I didn't want to be alone at all. But yet I didn't want to see anyone, but I wanted to be surrounded by my family constantly. So we moved in with my parents for a whole week. We were there, and I didn't move much. I just literally, I didn't sleep. They gave me sleeping tablets. I maybe had an hour or two a night for the first week. I just couldn't sleep.
What about breastfeeding?
Yeah.
That's another thing that I'm sure people don't think about.
Yeah, so they gave me a pill in the hospital and said, "Oh, this will stop your milk production." That's the thing. You've had a baby. Your body still does all the things that it's meant to nurture your beautiful child. So my body was still recovering. I didn't get, you don't have a calf's nerves come out. No one told me that I would still have all this after birth. And no one told me that my body would still hurt and there would be, I couldn't sit down. All these drugs had basically stopped a lot of the, I rushed and I pushed hard and I didn't do the things that I would normally do if I was trying to keep my baby safe and alive, and they didn't seem to matter so much in the delivery either. And they weren't worried if it took longer or if she was without oxygen and things, because they weren't worried about that sort of stuff. But, the pain and the agony on what it actually did to my pelvis was, quite excruciating. And the recovery and the, third degree tears and the, stitches that don't really, aren't all right. All that stuff that you still have to go through after delivering a baby. And then my milk came in and it was just so incredibly cruel. And I remember sitting in the bath, just, crying, and like my breasts were just oozing breast milk, and they were so engorged and swollen, but I just didn't want to touch them. I just wanted it to go away, but the pill did nothing. Like, it did absolutely nothing. And I remember at that time feeling really guilty because I didn't want it. I didn't want to feel that. I didn't want to have any breast milk. But my sister was really struggling to breastfeed her child. But I couldn't bring myself, look, I don't know if she would have accepted it anyway, but I couldn't bring myself to offer anything. Like, I just was like, I know that there are, for those who are in this experience and want to be able to donate their milk, there are such things as milk banks now, which is amazing, to be able to give to other children who don't have the opportunity to breastfeed, or they need that nourishment and they don't have it. But I could not have done that. Even if a milk bank existed back then, I wouldn't have been able to do that. It just wasn't, it wasn't for me. I just needed it to stop. I felt like it was just another cruel thing that my body was doing to me.
I'm sure this all feel very fuzzy and surreal. Now that you look back, was there anything that happened that you thought, despite everything, I really didn't expect that?
In terms of post-delivery, or?
Yeah, that, and also perhaps how people spoke
to you
and about Alfie.
There's some things I don't know if it's appropriate to say or not, but I never had my 12-week checkup. I was travelling for an art exhibition. Actually, I was going to Germany. I was exhibiting over there as an artist, and I was going to be 12 weeks pregnant whilst I was over there. And in fact, that's where we took our pregnancy announcement photo. Brad came over and met me there, which was wonderful. It was a really great trip. But I remember having the scan early and asking, I said, well, if my baby is Down syndrome, I want to have this child anyway. This is our miracle child. We had one egg and one embryo, and it turned into this perfect little, human inside us through IVF. And how lucky are we? We've, surpassed everything. If this baby is, deformed or has Down syndrome, we are still having this baby, so we're okay. No one told me that the 12-week screening was for other things other than Down syndrome. That's what they don't tell you. There's lots of reasons that they have the test. But in the hospital, my obstetrician said to me, it was before the baby was born. He said, you didn't have the 12-week scan, did you? Sorry, not before the baby was born, after Alfie was born. You didn't have the 12-week scan, did you? Because obviously it's natural for that after the baby is born that they check and make sure that everything's okay, 10 fingers, 10 toes, no deformities, etc. And she was perfect and, had these big, big eyes. And we have Spanish descent in us. I know I don't look like it, but we do. And Alfie's eyes were slanted. And he said, you didn't have the 12-week test, did you? And I said, no. And he said, well, if we look at Alfie, clearly she's Down syndrome. And I looked at him and I said, what? I said, no, you're totally mad. She's perfect. She's beautiful. Well, you see she's got these big eyes and they're wide set and things. And I said, well, my sister has slanty big eyes. And no, she doesn't have Down syndrome. I said, that's ridiculous. Don't be ridiculous. And I thought that was the end of it. What he did following that was go out into the area. And I think he did it to try and help my family. And I only found this out 2 years ago that this had occurred. But he went out into the waiting area and told my siblings and my parents that Alfie had Down syndrome. Now, when I got the autopsy results, and in fact, when I got the bloods back virtually days after, not the autopsy yet, he said, oh, sorry about that. I probably shouldn't have said that. Because she didn't have Down syndrome. She was healthy. She was well. So I don't know what the purpose of that was, whether it was about trying to give me an answer where there was none, trying to put something in there where there was none. It was really bizarre. But, he said it. And at the time I thought, oh, that's a stupid thing to say, whatever. But the thing that really got me was that he went and told other people that, even though it wasn't true. And that really hurt in hindsight.
So people, everyone, medical, are looking for answers, aren't they?
Oh,
and
they
want
are.
to give you one.
Yeah. And they want to give you an answer. And unfortunately, in this case, there was nothing wrong with Alfie. And in a majority of cases where stillbirth occurs, there isn't anything wrong. And sometimes we, don't have a cause. But just because there is no cause where stillbirth is concerned doesn't mean there wasn't any risk. And this is the thing, I was pregnant and I had this perfect pregnancy, but Alfie's movements changed dramatically. I had been having multiple Braxton Hicks, or I had been contracting regularly every 5 minutes for over 2 weeks. That's not normal. These are warning signs. These are red flags. But no one picked them up, or no one acted on picking them up, because Claire's strong, she can cope, she's fine. And it was all about me as a pregnant woman, but nothing to do with my baby. The questions weren't asked about my baby. And I think in hindsight, if I had been asked, because I was asked when I had reported, I didn't report a change in movements. I said, is this normal? I didn't really know what I was asking about that. I just thought, this is weird, this tightenings and, she's slowing, but is this normal? And the response was, is your baby moving? And I'd say yes. And then the response was, well, if you can't handle it, there is things we can do to speed up the process. Now, that's a very different question than, how do you think your baby's coping? How are you coping? It was all about, can you handle this? Are you really as strong as you think you are? That's how I took it. Now, words are powerful. Words are very powerful. And I took it as, of course I can. I am woman. I am strong. I am powerful. Look at me in this body, and the fact that I have grown a baby. I am this, alpha female. That's what, every pregnant woman, I think, feels when they're, growing a human being inside them. But had the question been about my daughter, do you think she can handle being squeezed every 5 minutes and potentially having being oxygen deprived? No, absolutely not. But I didn't understand that that's what was actually happening. There were other things that people said, like, you can go on to have another baby, or this won't happen again, or it's really rare, you're so unlucky. They're not helpful things. But what I have learnt in this journey is that nobody says anything meaning to say something wrong. And I hold no anger, animosity or hurt really towards any of these people. It still happens now when someone says, oh, do you have children? And I say, of course I do. Or how many kids have you got? I've got 3 children. And they say, oh, okay, how old are they? Now I start in reverse and I say, well, my youngest, Ada is, at this stage 4. And my second is Archie, and he's 5. And my third, Alfie, she would be 6. And that's where I leave it, unless they go, would be, what do you mean? I said, well, my daughter died. She died during labour. She died prior to delivery, and she was stillborn. And often that starts another conversation, but she's still my daughter. She's still one of my 3 kids. I just parent her very, very differently. So that's a really big thing to say, even in the society we live in now. And what has made you want to change the taboo around it? I mean, it seemed like your grief definitely fueled you in a way that's your own, in terms of making sure that she lived on forever and that other babies lived on through memories and were talked about. Yeah, and look, I think it's interesting because she'd live on forever without Still Aware. This is not about, I suppose the reason, what fueled my desire to start a charity in the way that I have, and the desire, there was no question that her life would extend beyond her birth.
Yeah.
She was my daughter. There was no question about that. I don't care what everybody else thinks. If, they think that we shouldn't talk about it because it makes me feel uncomfortable. That said, one of my sisters and her husband gifted Brad and I a trip away when we didn't want to be seen. We didn't want no one to know who we were. So that was actually a really nice thing to be gifted. We'd never been on a cruise. I was like, whatever, that's fine. But it was really great because we learned how to escape the crowds. We learned where to go, where people weren't going to be at certain times. And we were able to be, really isolated and in a space where we, didn't know anyone. And that was wonderful. We were out at sea in the middle of nowhere, and we were sitting out on the balcony, out on the deck when everybody else was inside. And this big butterfly flew in from, there was no land, there was absolutely no land anywhere. Flew in and just flew around us and played with us for ages. And I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. And we had lots of experiences like that with butterflies post-delivery. And following that, we decided we'd go and have an early, a ridiculously early lunch, because we were just trying to exist in this weird grief, pretending that everything was fine, but actually it was so wrong, and that was our type of therapy, I suppose, just being together and honouring our daughter and just talking about her and trying to let my body heal. And our hearts mend, I suppose, in some way, or learn to mend. And we went down and had an early lunch, and there was I don't know, anybody who's been on a cruise, the places where you eat are enormous, and there are tables everywhere. But for some reason, they sat us down, and there was one other couple in this entire restaurant deciding to eat at ridiculous o'clock, which was super early. And I thought, oh God, they're going to sit us next to they sat us next to these people. And I was like, okay, Brad, we'll just eat as quickly as we can and get out of here. And I thought, we won't engage in conversation. And that's really unusual for me. But when I was in the heart of the heightened level of grief, I literally wanted to speak to nobody. I felt like I was wearing this giant mask that said, my baby died, careful, beware. It was a really weird feeling. I felt like I felt contagious as well. It didn't feel right. I felt really, like something was wrong with me. And we sat there, and then they couldn't stop talking. Obviously, they were not there to be on their own and as a couple. They were like, okay, we don't want to talk to each other. Let's talk to this couple here. And they just were like, blah, blah, blah. I was like, that's fine. Just let them do what they need to do to chat. And then they said, do you have children? And Brad and I looked at each other and looked at them. Now, at that time, I had a locket.
Was this the first question from a stranger?
Time ever that I'd been asked that. And this was weeks after, not even this was 3 weeks after she had died, or she was born. And I had a locket on with her photo in it, and I was holding it, and I looked at Brad, and simultaneously we just said no. And immediately I felt my heart break even more, and it was just so uncomfortable. And then they went on to say, oh, well, you're probably too busy anyway. You wouldn't have time to have children. And I was just going, and it caused this massive anxiety attack in me. And I literally stood up, mid their sentence, and just walked out. I went into the cabin, and Brad, came down, and I was hysterical. And I was like, I was angry at myself because of the way that I had behaved. And I said, do you know what really got me upset? Is that they asked me a question that I could have answered very simply, and I chose to say no to protect them because I didn't want to make them feel uncomfortable. And I said, that's the last time that I will ever not validate my daughter because of somebody else's feelings. And so at that moment, and since then, I've never not mentioned her or never not said that she is my daughter. So when people have asked me, it's a lot easier now that I have, children to hold here in the flesh that are growing up around me. But even when, she was my first and only child, I would still then, when they said, do you have kids? I'd say yes. It didn't have to go any further than the answer of yes. If they wanted it to, it could get very uncomfortable because for them, that was weird for me to say that. Yeah, I do have a baby. Okay, well, where is it? She died. And I would just literally say that. What do you mean she died? Well, she was stillborn. And do you know what was really interesting? I was teaching at the time, prior to Still Aware beginning. and I went back to a little bit of relief teaching, and the kids would just, the ones that I had seen before, and it was fine being relief because she didn't know anyone, but I went back to the same school, and I had been pregnant, very, very heavily pregnant prior to being there. And one of them said, so did you have your baby? And I said, yes. And she said, well, what was it, a boy or a girl? I said, a girl. And she said, okay, well, how old is it now? And I said, well, she would be da-da-da-da. And she asked me a question. She said, oh, did your baby die? And I said, yeah, she died. And I thought I was going to get in trouble for telling this young girl that, yeah, my baby had died. I thought, oh, gee, have I damaged her? And then I realised, actually, she was totally fine with it. To a young girl of, no more than 8, she didn't find that uncomfortable at all. She didn't say, oh, that's, awful, oh my God. She literally just continued to ask about her. I told her my baby died, and that actually made her ask more questions. Well, is she an angel now? Where is she? Well, what? And I said, I don't know. Well, what did she die of? I don't know. It made her question, life and understand a bit better, and it taught me lots of lessons. Having kids around me taught me that. I remember when my nephew, we had literally just buried our daughter, and he said, hey, Claire, you know how Alfie had all of those toys, in her nursery? I said, yeah. And she goes, what are you going to do with them now? And I said, well, some of them I buried with her because they belong to her, and others I've kept because I'd like, her siblings to have them because I'd like to have another baby. And he said, oh, well, that's if you can have another baby. and I said, you're right, it is.
Oh, the
but
honesty.
The honesty. And I said, and at that moment, my sister and her husband stood up and walked away because they were like, oh my God, this is so uncomfortable. But I actually didn't find it uncomfortable. I thought, well, this is real. And that actually prepared me for a lot of the hard conversations with adults who don't know how to behave and don't know how to react. And all I will say is that, whilst there's uncomfortable things that are said, and that, you learn to deal with them better and respond better, they don't hurt. They didn't hurt me. The comments don't hurt, because it hurts more when people say nothing. The silence hurts a lot more because it's already a really, really silent space, and it shouldn't be. So, in terms of, you mentioned like Alfie living on and, her continuing her life in this sort of way, and her memory lives on in and through us. And I often look at her and I think, well, I wonder what she would be like. And yes, I understand that she had died, but I do believe that she was a pivotal part of my life and has certainly forged a big change in this world. And whilst Still Aware exists not for her, because it exists for every other family, it exists because of her life and her simultaneous death. Because without her, I wouldn't realise that stillbirth is the leading cause of death of children in Australia. I wouldn't have realised that we need to do better, and that actually most people know about stillbirth and don't say anything. I wouldn't have realised that there was no charity prior to ours in this space talking about stillbirth in pregnancy. I would not have realised that internationally they do a lot better than we do in Australia, that they have done for many, many years and for decades gone by. They have used conversation to create change and enact change. But we have decided to remain in this very, this world where death is uncomfortable. And so how do we talk about death and life simultaneously? But we do it in so many other ways. So why should it be any different in pregnancy? And so, yeah, that's where Still Aware came from, because nobody else existed in this space prior, despite the fact that and that's part of it as well, as I went out to all of the other charities around Australia and said, do you want to talk about stillbirth in pregnancy? To what was SIDS and Kids then, which is now Red Nose, to the Teddy Bear Love Club, or what was, and then Pregnancy Infant Loss Australia, which don't exist anymore, but went out to them as well. I went to SANS and the different CEOs that were there at the time. I reached out to the Perinatal Society of Australia and New Zealand, or prior to that they were called ANZA, and then also went out overseas. And I actually went overseas and met with people who had done things and created change to find out what we needed to do. Because the thing is, if it's not broken, don't fix it. If it's working overseas, great. But this is broken. What we're doing here is broken. So I needed to create that paradigm shift and to get people to listen up. And, anyone who's listening or watching this now needs to be part of that. We need to have the conversation, because without the conversations, we can't enact change.
I think you have enacted change already. I mean, there's charities only 6 years old.
Yeah.
But one thing, as an observer, I don't know if this is correct or not, but I haven't seen imagery before that you have encouraged, and that is pictures of dead children, of children that have passed. Do you believe that imagery should be shared?
Absolutely. And look, I said that about, I didn't share Alfie's photo at her funeral, but at her first birthday I did, because I decided that, hang on, I'm asking other people to share photos of their children. I'm not ashamed of my daughter. What I was scared about was not her. I was scared about how people would react to the idea of me sharing her. Get over it. Time's passed. Aren't you over that yet? And people do expect that. They expect that with death as well in general. But for some reason, there is this disconnect between the way we talk about those that lived on this earth for a long time and those that were only to live short lives within utero and didn't get to breathe earthside. So I absolutely honour her by sharing her photos. I find they are beautiful, they are serene pictures, they are not scary. And this is the other thing, is people had this, because we don't have anything to go by, because we haven't seen pictures of children who are stillborn, who are dead children. We haven't seen those photos more regularly, or hadn't prior to us really encouraging people to share it. So, in fact, people thought, well, there was something wrong with them. They were deformed. There's, they don't look right. And you're right. Some babies are deformed. There are some children that, are very, very small. There are some children that will have see-through skin, and there are a majority of babies who will have that perfect pink plump skin and the brilliant rose-coloured lips. And the only difference is that you just don't get to see their eyes open in the photo. But the thing is, these are all beautiful babies. These are babies that are celebrated by their families and should be celebrated by others. It is not about being mournful or sorrowful, but rather than that showing and showing life. Because I think there is a disconnect between pregnancy and a child, because until that baby is born, nobody seems to think of it as a life, as a baby, beyond that. It's birth that suddenly creates this delivery. I think there are other cultures that count pregnancy as a year of life, and I think that makes sense. And I always found that a bit hard, with our kids, because obviously doing her plaque, I said, well, she was not zero. She didn't not exist. She was 9 months nurtured, and she'll be remembered for a lifetime. So to me, I knew her for 9 months in the physical realm of my body. I got to meet her in the flesh for only hours, but she will live on forever in so many people's memories, because she's changing the world from the skies, wherever she is, and in whatever capacity that is, regardless of your beliefs. There is something, deep that she has left behind for others to grasp to, because I truly believe she sacrificed herself so that others could live.
In terms of, I guess, clinging to those memories, as you often say, you said hello and goodbye at the same time.
Yeah.
So having that moment in a photo is just so special.
So special.
How different is that in terms of dealing with the grief of your father, who sadly died 3 years ago?
Yeah.
And how different is that grief, and does it explain why sharing those images is so important?
I think so. I think it's super weird. I think people do think, oh, okay, well, that was a long time ago. You probably don't, you're probably over it. I don't think you ever get over something. But people don't cringe or feel uncomfortable when I talk about, Dad was for those who knew him, he was a wealth of knowledge, and he literally lit up a room. He was infectious. People wanted to be around him. Everyone thought they were his best friend, that he literally, you felt like, even in a room full of 50 people, you felt like he was talking to you and you alone, that his advice was solely for you. So he has imparted on me this, a great deal of business wisdom and knowledge, and I used that advice in my business background prior to going and, you know, doing, even in my art business, but in, you know, tourism and marketing and branding in my life before. Gee, I've had lots of little lives in my lifetime. But I went to him for business advice, and I use his sound business advice and life advice, and I question him daily, and he's part of my psyche. So in a way, I have things, and it's easier to remember and clutch to him. And I think, you know, as time passes, those memories become further and further away. I'm not going to get increased memories in the same way that I won't with my daughter. But I should be allowed to acknowledge Alfie just as much as I acknowledge my dad. And I often thought I could never, ever cope if my dad died. But I didn't know that I was going to lose my child. It's weird. And I've often thought that Dad, you know, he loved his grandkids. He was fun. He was the best fun pa. And part of me, when Dad died, I said to Brad, you know, isn't that strange? You know, I feel like, you know, Alfie's there for him, waiting for him on the other side, wherever that is, you know, to play with. So he's not, you know, so we've still got grandkids on the other side. But, you know, it's hard on both scales. You know, some of my siblings are going on to have more children, and he won't be there to hold them. But I desperately want everybody to have the love and the life that they deserve. And for some of us, our life is shorter than others. But that's the whole reason that thank you journal, I suppose, existed, because we need to enjoy and make sure that we appreciate every little breath that we can take, because we never know when it's going to be our last, and we never know if it's going to be that simultaneous birth and life, or if we're going to have a long journey of life and live to we're 100. But the fact is, everybody's life can make a difference, and, you know, certainly where Dad was concerned, he absolutely did, and people don't seem to be bothered by the fact that I mentioned him, but yet where Alfie's concerned, people are uncomfortable, but they're getting better with how I've grieved. So they see this as a sad thing that I honour Alfie, but actually it's a total celebration of little lives, and because everybody deserves to draw breath, and everybody deserves to be remembered in whatever way that is for you as a family. So it's certainly the grief of losing a daughter. There is nothing harder. And I say a daughter, it could be a son too, but there's nothing harder than losing a child. And I have yet to cope with the fact that my dad's not here with me, but I still hear him every day, and I can still clasp to his memory. So I feel very, 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 very blessed in my life, and very lucky to have lived the life that I am living, and that I'm not wasting any moment of it. You know, I feel like I'm truly making a difference because of my daughter. You know, kids change your life, and she's certainly changed mine for the better.
Now, I know you were fierce in life.
Yep.
I'm your cousin. I've grown up with you.
Yeah.
I definitely know that you're fierce in life, and I don't want to be on the wrong end of an argument with you, because you do not give up. You're so strong. Tell me about life in charity. I mean, it certainly seems it's not for the faint-hearted. I watch how hard you work, and that it has been 6 years, and it doesn't seem like you're giving up. You're only getting more and more strong.
Yeah.
How hard is it? I mean, I see you just working around the clock.
I think business
what's life
is hard.
in charity
Yeah,
like?
business is hard anyway, but I think there's something interesting in, you know, we rely so heavily on volunteers, which is amazing that there are, you know, very gifted, kind-hearted people out there, but you also can't ask a volunteer to, if they don't want to turn up, you can't force them to it. You know, you can't say, well, that's part of your job. So you rely very heavily on the gifts of others. I think, you know, you can only ask so often for something for free, but we you know, I'm not afraid to ask, although it doesn't come naturally. I think that comes from the tenacity of building businesses from the ground up, from, you know, years gone by, and obviously the lessons that I have learnt over the years, and that has all come into this. But I was foolish to think that people would care as much as I did. I was foolish to think that people would be supportive of a new kid on the block. You know, that that it would be easy to collaborate because, you know, we're all here for the greater good. And look, I think we all are, but it's really tough. It's a tough game, you know. It is not easy. This isn't all just flowers and sunshine, and it is well and truly more than a full-time job. I said to my husband, Brad, when I started Still Aware, that I would put the amount of energy into it that I did if Alfie was here, that I would be to raising a newborn and raising a child. And I absolutely do that and a whole lot more. I remember I applied for I was nominated for an award, and they asked me questions. They asked me how many hours I work. And they simply didn't believe how many hours I put in. They said, "Oh, that's impossible. You know, you'd collapse." And I said, "Well,
it's a very sleepless newborn, isn't it?"
Basically, you know, raising a newborn takes time. I think it's now been 6 years, and I would like to not have to treat the charity like a newborn baby that has sleepless nights. But yeah, you know, when you're up at 3 o'clock in the morning, you know, responding to a mother that's literally, you know, asking why her baby is stillborn, to, you know, banging on the doors of politicians in Canberra and advocating for families whose children are no longer here with them, or saying that every pregnant woman deserves the right to have the quality of care that she needs. Or hang on a second, what are we doing about the women that aren't being seen? What are we doing about rural communities, Indigenous women? What about all the disparities there are across different cultures, even in our country? You can't just have one level of care, it doesn't work. You need to make sure that everybody has the information, that informed understanding, you know, from creating and driving content that is backed by research, meeting with people who have been where we are now, making sure that we aren't reinventing the wheel, but if there is anything new that needs to be created, going out and creating it, doing new and innovative ways to be able to communicate the message of stillbirth and safer pregnancies, so that we can have better outcomes for expectant mums. And this isn't, you know, obviously as a charity, our goal is to, you know, end preventable stillbirth. We want to save babies. We don't want babies to die, and we want women to be healthy and well, and we do not want mothers to die. That's the ultimate goal, right? But to get there is a lot that happens in pregnancy. There are a lot of things that we need to be talking about, from everything from antenatal and, you know, physical well-being right through to how we deliver a baby and all the conversations in between. So it's making sure that we're across everything so that people can be aware of their choice and their informed understanding in pregnancy to keep their baby safe now, so that they can look after it after delivery, and so that families can be involved in the level of care that they deserve. So it's not an easy gig. And for those people out there that think, you know, I'm just going to, you know, start a charity because, you know, I think that would be nice, feel free to like join in, you know. Like the fact is, you know, you don't have to go and start your own charity. I did because nobody else wanted to. It's quite plain and simply, and I had the experience in business to do that. And I also had the drive, but it is literally, it's hard slog. And you also do get turned down a lot. People suddenly start to forget that you're a bereaved parent and show you the courtesy and decency and kindness that we show people who are wounded and hurt. But that changes very quickly when people feel a threat. But there is no threat here. This is about, you know, wanting to make sure that, you know, people get the care that they deserve, and that we can all have better and optimal delivery outcomes. But I am, you know, I am forthright and I am tenacious, and I don't take no for an answer, and I'll keep driving until I get the right answer that we need for everybody involved. So, you know, it creates an army. We need an army, to create change. And those people that are listening or watching this, they need to be involved in that conversation too, because you simply, you know, can't enact change on your own, and everybody can be part of the conversation in a small way or in a big way. It's really up to them.
What about the research space? What do we need to do there?
We need to involve parents and families more. I think there's so much that, you know, the strength of a bereaved parent, or the strength of a woman, and the strength of a family is so important. I think our own stories and people's stories are pivotal to change, because there are so many similarities in so many stories, but at the moment all we're doing is collecting data on death. So if you understand what I mean there, you know, a lot of what we have is based on autopsy results, which looks at the baby and looks at the placenta or placental pathology. but in fact there was an entire pregnancy that went prior to that. So what happened in the care provisions? What did you do in your pregnancy? Did you notice anything that went strange? In another death experience, so if there was a fire and somebody died in a fire, if there was a car accident, this is not to compare, this is purely just taking a scenario here. Or if a child died on a playground, people ask questions. What did you see? What happened? Did you notice anything strange over the days leading up to the child's death? But in pregnancy, we only look at death. We don't look at the life that went before. We only look at the fact that the placenta said this, the autopsy says this, sorry, there's no answer, or okay, yes, the placenta had malfunctioned, or okay, I think that this is what had happened, or yes, there was a deformity, or yes, there was a chromosomal abnormality, or yes, the baby was growth restricted. So it's all after fact. Whereas if we can actually assess the life prior to that, or the moments leading up to the death, we will find many, many similarities, in my opinion. So I think research does need to involve parents and community more, 100%. I think that's our way forward for change.
Thank you for letting me sit in your chair today.
No, that's absolutely fine. And I think, sorry about all the tears. Gee, you would have thought that I've never told my story before. I suppose I've never told it in that, convoluted, way. But look, I hope that everybody's gained something from the discussion today and that you're still listening this far on into the chat.
It's really nice. Is that waterproof mascara, actually?
No, it isn't. But I'm glad I'm not. I'm worried that I have got black running down my face. So if I do, my apologies, everybody.
You look beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing your story. You're an amazing woman.
Thank you so much for coming in and, wanting to chat with me and letting me share my side of the story too.
Thanks so much for joining us. I hope you can join us next time with your proper host, Claire Foord.
Thanks for joining us today, and we look forward to you joining us again next time. Remember, it's never too early to have a conversation, but it really can be too late. If you'd like to know more about Still Aware, the charity that's bringing you this series, head to stillaware.org.